standards, including out of protection for the laborers and operators.
But this is going on 6 days a week, 8 hours a day.
I believe it's whatever the approved times for the town are. I don't know if they're going to let them do Saturdays. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Whatever the building department allows.
Whatever the building department will allow, normal hours. I don't think we're looking for any.
Will not exceed OSHA.
Will not exceed OSHA. We'll be in compliance with OSHA standards. Well, we will be in, or RIS will be in compliance with OSHA standards. But I'm not going to speak for RIS on their methods.
Well, somebody's going to speak.
Yeah, if the applicant does have to speak to the contractor.
They'll be in compliance.
They will be in compliance.
Yeah, we can stipulate that. We'll be in compliance with OSHA.
Okay.
We touched on this. The board wanted to know the presence of hoods and central and LED drainage system. When we had done the camera work, I had taken pictures at the same time, so we had noticed or identified that the two catch basins in question, it did indeed have hoods. And that was all the questions that the board had last hearing.
All right, thank you for getting that to us, and we look forward to the summary of the chemical analysis. Now, can you tell us what you're looking for this evening?
Sure. Right now, we're talking about the demolition only, although we do want to go on to the site application as well. Other than the question on Phoenix and getting back to you on that, we do believe that we've submitted everything that you requested in the course of at least 2 and now 3 substantive hearings. So we do believe that we're at the point where we are entitled to, and it's appropriate, and you can issue an order of conditions and do your duty and your concerns in terms of all of the guidelines and BMP and regulations. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking very clearly for an order of conditions.
We've had some preliminary discussions, but the public should be aware that this is a joint project, or hopefully it'll be a joint project, so the town has to demolish its portion of the site, and the applicant is demolishing a larger portion. I don't know, what is it, 75, 25, something like that? And the difficulty that we've been trying to address is that if the applicant were to proceed with the demolition, right now it would leave an unstable Milton building, because the west wall, I'm not sure of the directions, I think it's the western wall, is in horrific shape. And I think that if you remove the main building and leave only the 25% that is owned by the town, we've got a bad wall there. And my concern is both public safety, that would engender a collapse without a shoring up plan. And the other thing, it's public safety, but it's also environmental, because if that building collapses, part of that building is dirty. And we need to be able to coordinate, my view is that we need to be able to coordinate the town's demolition with the applicant's demolition. And we're looking for a way to see if we can expedite and facilitate that project, that joint project. And I've been trying to struggle as to how best to proceed on that. And I'm open to all suggestions, but if we could get the town and the applicant together to move forward in coordinating this so that the demolitions can be done at the same time, I think that's critical. And I understand, Peter, you don't even have to say, or Steve, you don't have to say that you don't want to get held up by the town. I understand that. And I will reach out to the town. I mean, the Conservation Commission will reach out to the town and see if we can expedite a response to get everybody in line to do it together. Because I'm loath to suggest that we issue a permit to demolish part of the building until we have assurance that it'll be done at the same time. Because to leave one building or the other there would be a danger to the public and invite an environmental disaster.
Mr. Chairman?
Outside of our purview, though. I mean, is
Not environmentally, no.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, first, this evening is the first time after being here for several months that we've heard that. And it is somewhat shocking to me and to my client that it would take all this time for the chairman to suggest that we cannot get an order of conditions on our own. I do disagree with that. In fact, the question that the gentleman just asked is my position, that I don't think you have the power to link us to something off-site. What you state in the hypothetical as a potential problem if we went ahead and just knocked down our portion without the town, it just can't happen. There are so many constraints on both the liability and the permitting that's required outside of the order of conditions that we believe we're entitled to. No contractor in their right mind, never mind my client, would go ahead and tear down the portion of the building knowing that it's going to lead to the collapse of the adjoining attached structure. It just ain't going to happen. I think it's just simply an unfair, unrealistic concern.
Well, wouldn't we need a shoring plan?
You don't need a shoring plan. That's with the jurisdiction of the building department.
Oh, no, that's clearly within our jurisdiction. If a dirty building is sure to collapse when the support structure is removed, and we know that's a dirty building, that's an environmental disaster. And we're within, what, 70 feet of the Neponset River. That's environmental. I'm not suggesting that we have the duties and responsibilities or authority of the building department, but it makes common sense to suggest that if you take away one building and you've got a weakened wall, which everybody agrees, all the engineers have said that's a bad wall, and that's going to cause, or certainly could cause, the Milton building to collapse. It's a dirty building, it's next to the river, we don't want that to happen. But I do understand the linkage argument, and you make a reasonable point. And what I suggest is that you're going to get us additional information which we need on the chemical analysis. And we're not looking to kick the can down the road, but I suggest that we reach out, we as the body reach out to the town and see if we can expedite their petition. Now, their petition was just continued until May 14th, May 14th.
Just now?
The Milton, right, yes.
We're meeting Saturday with them.
It's Saturday, all right, so it's
April 4th.
April
18th.
So what I'd suggest is that, and I'm not trying to, conclude our discussion, I invite more discussion, but one idea would be to continue this hearing until Saturday, the 18th, and see if in the interim, and I know that's not much time, but to get the town's reaction to how do we get you both in there at the same time so that you don't get slowed down and the town is inspired to get this building down.
Can we come to a contingent approval? I mean, you're generally in agreement that both buildings want to be taken down at the same time, right? Yes. Okay, so if they're generally in agreement with that, and we believe that the town is also in agreement with that, can we provide a order of conditions contingent upon both the buildings coming down, which means that you're not looking for a shoring plan. We're not asking them to do something that they have no intention of ever applying. And everyone's on board with the same strategy.
It's a pretty good idea, but the applicant might suggest that contingency would evaporate in, say, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It's an idea that's been discussed. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So that, how do you feel about, maybe you can address that, a conditional order of conditions, or a contingent order of conditions, and specifically whether or not you'd seek to put a time limit on it.
Yes, it's certainly in the right direction. And again, the spirit is, I think, sincere on all sides, the town, us, and the Conservation Commission, from what I hear tonight. The reason for the time element in terms of that condition is simply because we don't want to have to wait forever, although still the pragmatics are, which is where there is room for us to discuss. The fact is, the strong likelihood is that it's going to be taken down together.
Right.
So, I can't articulate more than that, the concern that we don't want to somehow get into a catch-22, vis-à-vis the town.
Not to interrupt, we still have to adhere to the agreement that we have with the Board of Selectmen, with the town, for the demolition of the structure, which means they're coming down simultaneously. Okay. So we're obligated to work with the town on that.
Okay.
So this order of conditions doesn't subvert that.
It's in line with that.
It's in line with that.
I mean, this is a major premise that we've held for months.
Right.
And I support what you're putting on the table. This is almost going on the 1st of May. The summer's going to fly,
And we don't want to be around with continuance after continuance after continuance after we have been for a long time and have winter on us again. So anything that we can do to move forward, I think is going to be advantageous as long as we build into it the provisions that you were talking about. Reaffirm the jointedness of the undertaking and a reasonable timeline.
The difficulty is, and Peter's suggestion is a good one, but if you put a time limit on it, and you, I think, correctly said there's a strong likelihood that it will get done, but that presupposes that there is also a possibility that it won't. What happens if, after the passage of whatever the time is, 60 days, what happens if they don't come to an agreement?
Refiling?
What's that? Then we've got the same problem that potentially we have now, and that is a portion of the building coming down. Nobody wants that to happen, but the time limit is difficult.
In that scenario, if a portion of the building were coming down, your major concern is the shoring, right? Because you want to make sure that a shoring plan is in place in order for the other portion not to fall down.
Correct.
Okay, so if in that time frame, if at that time, at the end of that time, if they want to proceed with the demolition, then they need to submit a shoring plan for approval.
But,
Right, because then that gets rid of the whole thing off the table, because then they either run into the time limit and they come to an agreement, or they haven't.
well, the town would have to submit a shoring plan for their building.
I don't know how, that's between your negotiation
Right,
between you and the
because
town, I don't know.
well, there's ongoing negotiations with, as you heard from the previous continuance, that are going well.
Sure,
A lot of progress on it. But the deeded responsibility specifically calls for the removal of the building or the shoring of the town building.
sure.
So I don't want to take on that responsibility. If something happens that the town's not going to move forward with their demo,
Yeah.
and we came to a conclusion that we're going to move forward with ours, it's the town's responsibility to shore their structure. Because on the south side of the property, the town's building is on my property, and it's dependent on my building for standing in, and along with the west side where the collapse is, which is the town's responsibility as well. So when you talk about the dirty section of the building, that's the town's. When you talk about who's responsible for shoring, it's the town. But what we're saying is that I'm not looking to go in there with an order of conditions. I'm not looking to wait for 60 days and go in and start pulling the building
Right.
down and risk this thing coming in. I'm not doing that.
Right.
That's not what this is about. What this is about is just completing my application. We feel we've performed on our notice of intent, and we just want an order of conditions.
Right.
Just to close this thing out, that's all.
So, you know, I think that with some of the specific suggestions that have just been made, and since it appears that you're having a hearing on Saturday, it seems to me as though it makes sense for us to, again, we still want to continue the rest of the discussion tonight and on the site application as well, but it seems as though it would make sense to give us all a few days to think of what type of condition would be acceptable to us and meet your concerns, talk about it again on Saturday.
Makes good sense, Peter.
I agree.
Let's do that.
Any members of the public, abutters, folks that want to comment, question? All right, do you want to add anything to this before we adjourn until Saturday?
No, other than perhaps a question which I don't want it to be rhetorical, if you can answer, and I know that you're reserving, you know, for more information on Phoenix, and now we're reserving or talking again on Saturday about a condition related to the actual physical demo, the timing and the town and all of that. My question would be, can you give us a sense as to, you know, are you satisfied that we have submitted everything that, you know, is needed to be submitted, and that if we work out this last item, that you would be comfortable with either issuing or closing the hearing with a positive vote, knowing, of course, that the order of conditions has to be drafted. It probably doesn't matter if the hearing's closed or not, because we'd want an opportunity to comment on the actual draft order of conditions. But to have a sense on Saturday that that's where we're at, that, you know, we can indeed move forward. You could work on an order of conditions, and that we would have a sense that we're going to get a positive order of conditions.
I have to restrain myself sometimes because I'm an optimistic guy, but I think we've made considerable progress. You've given us some of the data that we needed, and it's very clear that we all want the building done.
Right.
That makes sense for everybody. So I think we're moving in the right direction, so I hesitate to say it depends, but if the Phoenix report comes back and said, oh, my word, we've only got 10 minutes to live because this is, horribly poisonous stuff, that's going to change things. I don't expect that.
I understood. No, I certainly understand about that, and that's, I appreciate that response. That's what I was hoping for, and
I'd like to touch on that report. I'm gonna, like I said, I'd circle back and request to see if they have a summary on it. I do know that the bill of lading for the wastewater, like I said, it was a standard facility. It wasn't a hazardous facility. The location where the water was pumped from is where in the lower machine room where the oil spill was. And the test for heating oil or motor oil came back negative for the sample, which I think is a good sign moving forward. If I can't get one by Saturday, I'll get one I'll get it as soon as I can and get it into you, but for the purposes of an order of conditions, even whether this water gets pumped and then filtered through the system, which if the water is okay, that would be the idea. And if not, if there were a problem with it that you felt like it didn't meet the standard to go into Pine Tree Brook, I'd have to tank it out before we hit the building like we did last time. I think there's a way of doing that without, just in case I don't get this.
I agree with what you're saying,
Okay.
but it would be a condition on the order of
Yes,
conditions.
exactly.
That,
right.
and I think Mike already brought that up, that you're going to have to give us some testing, some assurance through testing.
Sure.
And regular monitoring that what's
Yes.
coming off the site is not.
Is not a problem, right.
Injurious to the
Okay.
environment.
Yeah. Great.
The other thing that we had talked about before was testing of the existing wells around the tank. And we haven't touched on that today, and that hasn't been done yet. And from our perspective, it seems like a very simple and straightforward thing to do, in terms of getting someone to go in, pop the well caps, taking water samples and testing it. I still don't understand why there's any resistance to that. It seems pretty straightforward. And based on the report, it appears that there is no issue. So we just want to verify that from when the report was done to now, that we're not triggering something. And I don't know that it changes anything relative to the need to pull the tanks out right away, but we just want to know what's under the ground that we want to know that it's as clean as the report says that it was.
I understand that. I thought that we did discuss it and shared our thoughts as to the timing, which is the concern. And again, for the safety and environmental, I should say, protection,
Sure.
which is obviously your legitimate concern, as it should be, what we don't see is why it has to be done right away. I'll share with you what we now have as a condition in the comprehensive permit that has been issued. It was issued the day after our last hearing with you. And this is the timing that we obviously believe is appropriate because we accepted the condition. After demolition of the buildings on the site, but prior to the removal of the underground tanks, the applicant shall engage the services of a licensed site professional who shall prepare a Chapter 21E report for submission to the town. No building permit shall be issued unless A, the Chapter 21E report indicates that there are no oil or hazardous materials located within the bounds of the site, or B, the applicant has removed or mitigated such oil or hazardous materials in compliance with the requirements of DEP, because that's the protection. To do it right away, as a condition, either before an order of conditions or as an order of conditions that calls for it sooner, I just really don't see what the harm is, because this timing works, and we're agreeing we'll do it.
And that's prior to the demolition?
No, it is, but just so that everybody's on board, I just found that out today, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't know that the ZBA had written an opinion. I think it was the day after our last meeting.
Yes, it was the day after,
The
yeah.
day following our last meeting. I wasn't aware that they had done that.
Yeah.
But so Peter's recitation is accurate. And Kathy, could you see if you can get a copy of that and distribute it to all of the commission members? That would be very helpful.
So that's saying testing
It's after the demo.
after
but before
the
the
superstructure demo?
Yes.
But
But
after...
Before the removal.
Foundation?
before- That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And from a practical standpoint, like the level of the tanks in the ground and the level of the monitoring wells, the tanks are below the water table.
Yeah.
So I'd rather, when we get the building down, lift the tanks, and it's either a problem or it's not, and clean it up. Because the wells, whether it comes back clean or if it came back clean, it still doesn't, for me, it
Doesn't change what you have to do.
doesn't change what I have to do.
Right.
And
Okay, come back clean. They went in, they were dirty when they went in.
they were not dirty when they went.
Yes, they were.
No, they weren't.
Look at the Rizzo
I
report.
looked at the Rizzo report.
Rizzo report says there's oil down the bottom.
No, it doesn't.
But, wait a minute,
No, it doesn't.
Greg,
Page
But it
28.
doesn't.
the issue is the same, though. Whether it's clean, it doesn't matter. If it's dirty, it doesn't matter, because they've got to come out.
Come out anyway. The
And he has to
wells,
remediate it.
there were 10 wells drilled. The ones that are inside where the lower machine room in the water table is where the oil is. Not on the outside where you're asking to test. The ones inside in the lower machine room where it broke the water table is where it came back with oil. And that flow was taken out, all the fill was taken out, all the water was taken out.
Down to rock.
And down to rock, and there was confirmatory samples taken on the perimeter of that.
That's how I read the
That's
report
just-
as well.
Yeah, that's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So you're not even asking me to test the stuff that they found oil. You're asking me to go outside and look around. And what I'm saying is,
Adjacent to the, under the 10,000, two 10,000 gallon tanks? Or one 10,000
there's one
gallon
tank,
tank?
yeah, right.
That said, I think it's RZ3 and RZ4.
They didn't, it specifically stated in the report that the groundwater monitoring wells, which is RZ 1 through 4, that they did not find oil in those, in the water content, and that's why they didn't move any further.
Right.
That's
It's all
what-
inside.
Yeah, that's it. So my thing is, we get the buildings down, lift the tanks, if there's a problem there, clean it up. Because no matter what the proposal is, whether it's mixed use, 40B, whatever it is, the fill, both in the lower machine room and out with those tanks, has to come out of the ground.
Right.
For a foundation. It's either gonna go into a truck that's gonna go to a clean landfill, or it's gonna go into a truck that goes to a dirty landfill. There's no difference. Doesn't mean a thing. I'd just rather do it in a logical sequence.
Right. My concern was, if we're gonna use the area above the tanks as a filtration basin, oh, actually, we lined it.
Right.
That's right.
So my concern before was that we wasn't lined, and there was a potential for that water to go
Right.
through it, and now we said it's lined, so there isn't, we're not
And I
feeding.
think we moved it up
It's
off
all
of that
going
as
out.
well. Right.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, my issue went away.
Real sense of
You're right.
deja vu.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
In the area of the basin we were filling in, we were lining the top
We're
of
lining
that,
it,
too.
That's right, so there isn't, we're not getting infiltration above the tank,
Right.
correct.
Any other thoughts or questions? Because I think we have your assent to continue this until Saturday at ballpark noontime?
Do we know noontime
At-
here?
Yes, it will be here, right.
You wanna establish the new time good for you?
Well,
You have a few different,
we've got a lot of places to go. We should be back here, and we'll do our best to be here at 12, but Kathy's setting up a schedule, and then
Okay.
she'll post that on the website.
I move you provide lunch.
give myself. Yeah,
We'll have to check our budget for that one. Anything else, Greg?
Right, the one thing that still concerns me is that DEP reviewed this, okay, when the initial spill occurred, and they gave it a conditional approval as a light manufacturing facility. I don't know if there's different criteria from a light manufacturing facility to a residential facility. Now, they say they're gonna test all this according to DEP, but what standard at DEP?
Well, the
I can't-
comprehensive permit from ZBA says that they have to get a licensed site professional, which I think was your idea,
Right.
after the demolition but before the construction. And I think that's a valid question to ask the LSP. And we'll have guidance from the
We
LSP.
don't have any guidance or any input to the LSP.
Well, that,
Well, we could, I mean, we could ask the applicant to give us a consultant, but if it's, I mean, there are certain LSPs throughout the state, and their obligation is to, to be truthful and honorable to the state, because that's their license.
Yeah, but
So if we were not comfortable with
there are
this,
two different criteria. Are there two different criteria?
Mr.
One
Chair-
for manufacturing, one for residential.
I can put you at ease. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Go ahead, Peter.
And again, I respect the question, but I can put you at ease. It's going to have to be reviewed by the LSP and attain, hopefully, already attain, or else the mitigation that would be required would be to attain for the residential standard.
Right.
I mean, that's fait accompli. We'll stipulate to that, because that's the condition in a residential 40B, so we'll agree to that. Again, I respect the question, but that's what it's going to be. So if there's a different standard, more onerous for a residential, that's what we have to do.
Yes.
So you don't have to be concerned, yep.
During the excavation, if they find materials that are contaminated to beyond the point of residential, those materials have to be removed.
That's right.
I mean, they don't know what's in the ground. So as the excavation goes, they sample that dirt as it comes out, and if it comes out dirty, it's got to be, they got to keep going until it comes out not dirty. That's standard practice.
With that, any other questions, comments, members of the public? Hearing none, you assent to continuing this until Saturday,
Yes.
sometime around noon.
Some weeks left.
All right. All right, next on the agenda is 131 Elliott Street. You're the fun.
I will reserve judgment.
This is the,
Thank you for yours, Greg.
number 7 is the site development for 131 Elliott Street.
Sure, same scenario. For Chris to summarize, I'm having a momentary memory lapse as to how much we got into that. I think we did at the last
We really
hearing.
didn't. I don't know, we have nothing to summarize. I mean, if you have any more questions on the site, I mean, we can answer them, or try to anyway, but
But you don't have a, we saw an original plan that included the basement drainage system. I mean, I remember going through all of that. But that was a long time ago.
Well,
That was-
let me-
What was that? That was,
Well, just so you know, with this, issued and final, no appeals on the comprehensive permit, the building plans are the same. You're certainly right, and this is what I thought we discussed, but
Sorry.
with the zoning board,
Hold on, Peter, you have to change the tape.
right, exactly.
Thank you.
So what was submitted both to the ZBA before they concluded and voted, and what we submitted, again, my memory, I apologize, whether it was discussed much at the last hearing with you folks, I'm not sure, but Chris will get more into that, but we did submit what is the one significant change, which is it's no longer tying into the existing town system there. It's now, basically, I believe it's all a gravity flow drainage to the Pine, up Elliott to Pine Tree Brook. And we submitted the plans on that, and we had agreed even with the zoning board that we have to get the stormwater management permit from town DPW.
correct.
And of course, we have to get your order of conditions, but where we didn't, because it's 40B, just to point out, where we didn't ask for a waiver on that. We'll work with the DPW and get their own approval. So,
Correct. I mean, the set that we produced and submitted to the ZBA and to the commission reflected all the comments throughout the whole process, so that it's a clean set. It's got all the changes, all the revisions. And the last major revision related to the drainage was, instead of using the undersized where the drain line that goes under the tracks turns into the 8, we met with the town DPW and agreed on installing this line directly into Pine Tree Brook across the street, which we do. We have to apply for a stormwater management a connection permit with the town, so they would have review over that. That is really the only change over and above. I mean, and when we discussed it, we talked about it. That came from the camera ring and all that stuff.
true.
So,
That relates directly to the piping, to the drainage and the piping system. And I remember we talked, and that's what I was remembering about the basement system we talked about, and the change out of the parking level. But I don't know that we've gone into discussions about other issues relative to planting plan, relative to other issues about the construction of the new building that are pertinent to us, and I don't recall that.
I think you're right. I think we have some...
We did way back.
In the initial
I-
presentation,
Yeah, yeah.
in the initial presentation, I know it was covered, which was, November, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time
I do agree that I don't think there was much discussion with you folks yet,
Right.
but I also believe that we have submitted sufficient
Yes.
and significant, but sufficient information for you to go about looking and asking questions and, you know, to move it along.
We have the latest set of, when did we receive the latest set of drawings? Do we all, these drawings, we have these already in our hand, in possession?
What's the date on those?
It's the revision of 210, 215.
You would have had
I
them
believe
in
they
your
were
packet.
submitted before the
Yeah,
last
I thought we-
hearing with you
I know we
folks.
gave you half scales
You
at the
do?
last
Yeah.
meeting, but yeah.
Yeah.
We have those?
If you need any more sets, we'll get them to you. Let us know.
All right, one of the issues that we addressed, I think it was November, was that we were losing a significant amount of open space, and that was a concern. If you put the whole project site into 4 quadrants, and you look at it from the Elliott Street side looking towards the river, the lower right quadrant, the one closest to Elliott Street, was covered almost entirely by a building. There was a narrow strip of open space, but we essentially lost that open space, and that's, of course, where our tree was, that is a concern, and that's the source of the enforcement order. And we were looking to, obviously, we can't find a 250-year-old tree that we can transplant and put back there, but we certainly need space there, open space there, in order to replicate as best we can several large trees. We do have a performance standards of 3 to 1. I don't know how in the world we get 3 250-year-old trees, so that's impractical. But we do want a response to that. But right now, you've taken away from us that open space. And I think in a moment of candor, I had suggested that you go to the town, I think I said it to you, Steve, that you go to the town and see if you can negotiate getting that piece of land, which would be the upper right quadrant, closer to the river, that abuts onto Central Avenue. And if you had that to give back to us as open space, but you can't give us somebody else's open space and get credit for it. That belongs to the town. And therefore, I remain hopeful and I remain optimistic that you can come up with a mechanism to get that land as your own. Then your plan would make a whole lot more sense to us, because essentially you've got 3/4 that you own, and you filled 3/4, and you took away our open space. We need something back to protect the environment, and that falls clearly within our mandate under the State Wetlands Protection Act. We understand the ZBA component of this, and we're not talking about the bylaw, but it's still an adverse impact in the riverways protection area, and that's a significant issue. It is for me. I'm not speaking for the commission, but that's a big issue as to how do you replicate that which you've taken, the tree, and how do you prevent the project from eliminating the open space that the citizens have enjoyed for these 300 years.
A couple of responses, and Steve, you can fill in some of the facts, but I think the open space aspect, although the open space in our proposal, because of the tightness of the site, is limited, but there is some other open space. And what you're, I believe, talking about open space with the existing Hendry's building is really paved. I mean, it's not like it's green, usable, you just said, for our citizens for hundreds of years. I can't speak to hundreds of years ago, but I do know,
Craig can.
Sorry, I didn't mean to set you up. And it's not just that it's an eyesore and all of that, but I mean, if you walk the site and see what's there, it's been a long time since there was really any, usable open space. In that front corner at Central where you say, it's being eliminated, well, it's true, it's going to be, well, at the very front, it's building, but the point is now it's
It's going to parking right there now.
well, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
now, what I'm
yeah.
saying is what has been referred to by the chairman as the corner near Central of open space. It's open only if you talk about there's no structure on it, but it's paved. It's not in the environmental sense open space. So albeit there's not a huge amount of new green and tree plantings and all, but there is some which, Chris or Steve can go into in more detail. So I think that we certainly, within the Riverfront Protection Act and the WPA, especially with the acknowledged standards that they have recognizing, a previously disturbed or built area. That's exactly what we have. So I think we can, and I say we, I mean together, I think you can make findings and issue an order that we've met that concern as to open space alone. Now, the tree cutting, that's something else for the reasons that you said. We can't, on the site, put in maybe not even one, nobody can put in a 250-year-old tree anymore. In terms of the size of a tree, we can do some plantings. Maybe we can embellish, and I don't want to just throw something out that's meaningless, so stop me, nip me in the bud if I'm completely wrong. But, maybe we could embellish the size of some of the trees that we're proposing on site, number one.
Which I think we've discussed.
And number two, and I believe this was discussed, excuse me, it must have been November, maybe last time. The idea of, and it would take agreement with somebody, I think it was a town site that we were talking about. Which site was it? With the library? Yeah.
If they were interested.
Yeah, and it would take obviously agreement with the town, but putting one or two, or if it absolutely has to be three, but on a site like the town library site where, number one, there's space to do it, to do that as, yes, off-site mitigation, but it still helps the environment and the public concern that you're concerned about in terms of your role and your protecting the interests under the Act. So that could be done as off-site mitigation. That would be really meaningful, because again, it's not just town-owned, but it's a public realm if it's the public library or something like that. So those are the two responses that we have, dealing with the tree itself and then the open space.
Any thoughts on the open space and trees? Looking for guidance or from above?
No, I mean, I think we're a little bit in disagreement here. I think we're still looking for more actual open space. We've discussed this in the past, and the designs as presented do not offer us that. No real public use of any little bit of the design, the building. And as for the trees, I think we have to give it a whole lot more thought as to how we replicate, as to how we compensate for the loss of that tree.
I agree with that.
Any thoughts?
I agree with you.
Just another fact, which I didn't express it this way, but Chris reminded me, I don't believe there's a quantification the way there are with some things in the WPA and the regulations in terms of the open space. And in fact, we actually are decreasing the impervious area in our proposal versus what's there now. So, I mean, I think that's a significant factor, pure and simple.
I haven't seen those measurements, but I don't doubt
I'd
you,
like to
Chris.
see those measurements.
We issued those in the stormwater report at the very start of the filing, and then revised based on Horsley Witten's comments on watersheds and whatever, all the review we went through with the Board of Appeals. We've satisfied.
We weren't privy to the Board of Appeals review.
Yeah, well, that
Since we're, well, presumably we can have, even if it's brief, we can continue this after tonight's discussion to Saturday as well. So, why don't you pull out the pertinent parts that you're referring to for the next hearing?
Mm-hmm.
I would appreciate more time to go back and look at what there was and at my notes at that time to see what was discussed and said. And I honestly, I'm trying to remember back and not all there. Honestly, yeah, so.
All right, Arthur, any thoughts or comments?
I think less of a strict constructionist on this than other colleagues, considering the limited business space that we have in this community, the burden of taxation, and the need to be reasonable in terms of the construction process in the town. I agree with tree mitigation. I don't believe it has to be on site. It can be, and we discussed the possibility of other sites such as the library. I'd like to see the specifications too. I've known that area for a long time. I think what's being proposed will be a significant betterment for the long term in the town of Milton. So I just don't want us to be taking such a strict position on this, that we lose credibility in terms of not only this particular project, but other projects that the town sorely needs. I'm also interested in knowing what the plans are for the town for its portion of the property. We have a very limited and restricted tax base, so I think we have to be very cautious about the decisions that we make as a conservation commission as they apply to other bodies in the town, and that we not encroach upon the responsibilities of other bodies.
All reasonable points, but another reasonable point, or I should say and, as opposed to but. Another reasonable point might be that if in my design of the 4 quadrants, if the applicant had all 4 quadrants under its control, I think there's a far superior design that could entertain both open space, public use, and fulfill the goals that you just mentioned, you know,
But
the
isn't
tax
that,
base.
at this point, hypothetical, because we do not know what the determination of the town-owned property is going to be?
What do you mean determination? That's up to the applicant and the town.
That's my point.
Right, but if, it would make it a whole lot easier for our consideration in considering environmental resources and our performance standards. And like protecting open space is it's a good thing. And it would certainly make a whole lot more sense to me that if they had that open space to deal with and then reconfigure their building, and then we could get the best of both worlds. And I would just encourage the applicant and the town officials that are negotiating to come to some kind of a resolution. I think it would aid us in our task.
Well, I think we're well ahead of what has been in place historically in this section of the town, considering many of the industrial bases that we have had compared to today. So again, we're well ahead. I don't think we can presuppose what ought to be done or what the town will do with that other piece of property until the town tells us.
That's true. But in the meantime,
So I can't discuss anything. How can we discuss in the meantime?
well, but that's the problem. Well, it's my problem, not the rest of the commission. My problem is that as I look at the design currently, it's too big for the 3/4 of the lot because we are losing space, and we did lose a tree. And I'm mindful of the fact that the applicant was told not to cut that ancient tree down, and did so. And that was the origin of the enforcement order. And time has passed, but I haven't forgotten. And I think that's an issue. And I don't know if the other commissioners think it's an issue still or not.
Oh, it's still an issue.
So I agree it's an issue, but do you penalize on space because of that if we can come up with a reasonable mitigation?
Well,
Outside of the
we're doing
penalization
two
space.
things at once. Off-site mitigation, I agree with.
Okay, do
But
it together.
not necessarily all of it. I think some of the mitigation should be done on-site.
And my suggestion would be to let them come back and let us know what might be feasible. I think that was part of the commentary that we heard.
Well,
And I'd also like to hear ultimately from the town, and maybe we could on Saturday, as to what their plans are for their portion of this property. I don't think it's fair to us not to know that.
And Arthur, I agree with you about the need for tax revenue and the need to have a building there that we can be proud of. But I think the open space element that I'm looking for, and that I think John is as well, actually makes that a more valuable building, both for Mr. Conley now and for the future, both for the people living there in the town and for tax revenue. So that's how I see this, and also comports with our obligations on the Conservation Commission.
I don't disagree with that, and I'm not so sure that that can't be achieved within the plan. I do know that there are many people in this community that are absolutely beside themselves over the tax base and the lack of tax revenues, and it's getting to a breaking point. I also know that there are plenty of people that are very disappointed in the numbers of years. I wish I could give you the numbers, their legions, with how long it has taken for this to be resolved in the town of Milton. and business people who work in other communities say this would never be tolerated. So I just want to move this forward in a reasonable manner without undue penalization and as much of an appreciable and reasonable mitigation of past incidents as possible. I don't think we can be punitive. I think if we're punitive, that message is going to carry into a lot of audiences for a long time and will work against the community.
Compensatory is the word, not punitive. I agree 100%. That's not our role to be punitive.
I would agree with
Compensatory
compensatory.
is legitimate.
Yeah. This is not an easy one,
No, I agree.
and it shouldn't be.
Is there any room for movement under the current property division there, which I call the three quarters, you've got the three-quarter quadrants. Is there any possibility of shrinking the size of the building to give us more space?
The real answer is no. And I would submit that in addition to what I already said, and even recognizing your word compensatory and the concern about open space, but as with all property rights, you don't look at them separately. You have to look at the whole package. And when you overall look at the comparison of, let's call it before and after, the interest that's under the Wetlands Protection Act that you are doing a good job to protect and all of that, are the interests really advanced or not advanced, made better or made worse, if you compare the before and after? And if we can't go forward with the building that we have approved, which I say 40B only because we have the permit and they're hard to finance, we need the number of units, and that's not to say that the deal with the town may not come to fruition. You heard from the town. But we have to look at it as the 40B project right now, and we're entitled for you folks to make a decision based on this plan, not on the conjecture about the possible 4 quadrants, as you put it. And so when you look at the before and after, is the town better off, and are the interests that you're protecting under the Act better served by creating a problem for us to go forward so that the building may last, the existing building may stay there and continue to have the potential hazards and the, lack of good systems and all of that, versus a new building that doesn't have tons of open space, but actually, as you will see, does have less impervious area and cleans up so many aspects, which again are part of the purposes of the Wetlands Protection Act. If you make that comparison, again, I think it's a no-brainer in terms of what would be appropriate and a very responsible decision on your part. So, that's, we can get into the details more with the information that Phil will give you to refresh your memories, but, that we have to push forward on the building as it's proposed. Pure and simple.
Understood? Any other questions?
Yes. Have you people considered the DCR project going on at Central Ave and how the coordination between the two projects is going to come about?
I haven't considered it yet. I saw a notice that, I believe it's sometime this month, they're having a meeting on the DCR Path construction project over at the Foley Building over on River Street. I don't know if that's already happened or if it's...
I saw the notice
on
too,
that.
but I don't know
I don't have the
the date.
date. I do know that they are...
It was last Monday.
Last Monday? Okay. In the notice, they stated that the access for the work was going to be done at the entrance at Central Avenue where...
Right, that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, so I don't... They're coming in from the Dorchester side of the tracks in that entrance. They're working on that side of the tracks. We're not, so...
You're not?
And we're not going to be on the river side of the tracks. That's where the path is going. So I don't know if we're going to be interfering with them or not.
The path is at the tracks.
It's on the opposite side.
It's on the opposite side. It's not on the building side.
5 feet.
No, you have the tracks.
He's talking about the side of the
riverside.
track.
It's on the river side of the tracks. It's away from us. I mean, it is. I don't know what else to.
I can go to my car and bring you back the plans if you'd like to see them.
I mean, I've been down there a number of times.
Yeah?
But
They're not on the Milton side of the tracks. The path is not on our property side of the tracks. It's not.
It is.
It's not.
It goes, the path, the new bike path goes through the MBTA right away.
It goes through the MBTA. There's land on the MBTA to the right. If you're looking at it from the bridge and you're looking down the trolley tracks, and our building is on the left side, and then you have the trolley tracks, and then you have the bike path on the right side, and then you have the river.
I'm talking about the bike path.
Yeah, the bike path
is right there.
It's on the,
Right, it is.
it's on the opposite side of the tracks. What I'm saying is how, first of all, that's the town property, that corner. I'm not anywhere near that entrance. And the second piece is that it's on the right side of the tracks. I'm working on the left side of the tracks. I'm not interfering with the trolley tracks at all. I have nothing to do with it. I'm not gonna be over by the river whatsoever.
All right. Any other thoughts, questions, comments from abutters, members of the public? So we'll want to continue this until Saturday.
Saturday as well. This is
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just so that we can, get some idea of what we need by way of additional information. What do you need?
I just need to look back to refresh my memory about previous discussions. Because
Okay.
honestly, it was a long time since we've gotten into the discussions of the
Do you
new
want to do it
design.
this Saturday, or do you want to do it in May?
Well, it would actually make more sense,
To do it in
I
May.
think, to do it in May, but we have to have your assent to kick it to May.
Well, since we're going to be here anyway, let's say Saturday, we'll get you the information and, recognizing even after a long morning that you're having, and maybe you won't want
It'll
to
be
spend
long.
much time. But I don't see any harm, because I'm not saying may not turn out to be the case, but let's just take advantage of Saturday for what it may be worth.
All right, so we put it on the agenda, and if
The 18th.
Yeah, this Saturday, the 18th, yeah.
all right. All right. That's it. Thank you very much.
you.
Anything else, Steve?
I just want to touch on the tree order. I came into the commission back in 2011, after the tree was cut down. My testimony is contrary to what you stated, that I cut the tree down despite being told not to.
Well, Ken Nade was a commission member.
Ken
He was there.
Yeah, Ken.
Kathy
Right.
was there
And
earlier than Ken.
Yeah, but my testimony was that we went down to that site, we were cutting the tree because it was a safety hazard. We had two arborist opinions letters stating that the tree was a safety hazard and had to be removed. So, and I went through extensive discussions with the planning board to try to get them to realize that that tree couldn't be a part of the development. It was not successful. I went down and cut the tree down. Ken showed up there. That tree was already cut. I told him that, and I told him that night. So, like, what I'm saying, I just want to get on the record that I disagree with your characterization. That's not how it happened.
Okay. I was on the phone with Kathy, and she was there a whole lot earlier than Ken Nade.
But
I was
again-
also on the phone with Ken Nade when he was standing there talking to you and the policeman.
Sure.
So
I remember what-
it was
believe me, I
clear. And I agree with you, because he said they've started cutting. But, and I remember the tree whisperer coming in a month or so later, talking about how many years left.
Jess, yeah.
And I think he had another, generation or so left in the tree. 25 years?
But that was the arborist that was hired from Jamestown, Rhode Island by a former planning board member who is probably,
Oh, I thought the tree
No.
whisperer was your guy.
no, he was hired by the planning board. And,
Oh.
they had to go to Jamestown, Rhode Island to find a guy that said that we should save the tree. Maltby Company is a reputable company in this area, and he recommended it be cut down. And George Atkinson from Horticultural Technologies recommended that it be cut down.
But that's not the point. The point is a legal point. It's very clear. You have to have permission to cut it down.
Not dis-
You
not
didn't,
dis-
you didn't come to us.
John,
with
not
a-
dis-
No gainsaying that, but again,
Not disagreeing with that.
in terms of what Steve's really just correcting is that he was specifically told not to, without the context of what he said in terms of the reasons why he did it, and that he wasn't actually told not to, albeit, yes, it was done without permission of the Concom. He just wanted to make the point as to his actual personal experience and memory of how it all happened. That's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
fair enough. Thanks, all. See you Saturday.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is number 8, and we're going to have to start thanking people for their patience here. This is 375 Hillside Street. This is a continued hearing. I lost all the ink in my pen.
So they're on the agenda just so we can make a time for a site walk this Saturday.
Oh, okay.
Just so that we can what?
Publicly said there will be a site walk this Saturday.
The only thing I want to know is,
Oh, I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying.
That's 375?
I thought you were referring back to 131 Elliott Street, and I
No,
lost
no,
it.
no.
Okay,
we just need to make note, they moved the 2 trees to the front yard, but they call them dogwoods. We got to make sure they're the native dogwoods, the Cornus Florida, as opposed to the Coosa dogwoods, so we have to make sure.
now, when you say they
See
moved,
here?
is that the replanting part?
Yes.
Or do they change
This is
what they're
the
taking?
actual, they cut down the trees, remember the ones in front?
Right.
They said to put some trees here and others they put in back. The sugar maples and the white pine.
Yeah, okay.
They also put these trees, 2 trees down. So just, we have to make sure those are the right native trees.
But we're doing a site walk,
On Saturday.
375? All right, and so there's nobody here for that? What about 390 Hillside Street?
Yeah.
I think a couple,
All right, good.
patiently waiting.
Yes. Patience is a virtue.
Incidentally, it's 395 Hillside Street. I think most of your records are correct, but you should make sure that you don't keep repeating the 390.
Okay.
Got some more things to look at. 2 more.
375 is
We're on
to
395.
sidewalk.
We're here at 395.
And 390. 390.
Wait, Marion, say that again? You said 390, we've got 390 on the agenda, but it's 395.
395.
Thank you.
And Kathy, 375 is correct.
Correct.
Okay.
It's right here, 375.
I got them to my father, so just scoot them over here.
Welcome back, Ray.
I changed it to 395.
You didn't hear that.
Do I meet you?
Oh, thank you.
So just to formally say, I'm Mary McKettrick, representing the applicant. Tom Palmer has done the environmental analysis for us. We're both here tonight to provide you with updated information that you had requested in previous hearings. I've given you 2 very brief memos. The first one just said that we are submitting a revised site plan, which you should have. I have a large copy of that site plan, or a larger size copy, which shows the location of the driveway as you had requested. It shows location 2, which was the porch location that we had talked about at your last meeting. The porch is moved over, and we've indicated where there would be hay bales or other devices during construction to protect the wetland or the riverbank area, the stream bank area. In addition, tonight, I think Tom has passed out the other plans as well. So Tom's going to just briefly explain 2 more plans that we've produced for you, which are drafts, and they're really prepared, especially so that you can look at them when you do the site walk on Saturday. But one is a plan that shows removal of invasive species and also shows plantings. And another one is a plan that talks about drainage and how drainage will be controlled and what some of the options are, which we want you to think about when you take a look at the site on Saturday. I have one other sort of technical point, but I want to bring it to your attention and make sure that whatever decision you make in this case, that it reflects the correct porch dimensions. Because in the application, there were a couple of different, slightly different or somewhat different dimensions provided for the porch, and part of the reason for that in the NOI was that I didn't originally include the area of the stairs. But we now have an accurate square footage for the porch and the stairs. And I've given you that in a memo, and I'm asking you the question as to how that gets corrected. Does that get corrected because if you issue a decision, that in the decision you reference the correct dimensions, or is there something else that I need to make a correction to that? Well, I've
Kathy,
given you a
the
plan that shows the dimensions,
Yeah,
so
we
you have them.
need a revised plan.
And you have it.
Okay.
That's what you
That's
have.
what
That's what we've given you. We gave you a revised plan for the new porch location. It has the dimensions of the porch. It has the correct square footage for the porch down in the left-hand corner of that plan. So it actually, you know, it should be pretty clear. That's a total area for porch and stairs of 131 square feet.
What is the date on that plan that you say is revised with the square
You-
footage
Well,
on it?
we gave it to you at the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
At the last meeting, we gave you 3 plans for porches. One was the original location, one was
Yes.
moved over, and one was on the side.
Yes.
And those are detailed plans, and they show you, that's what I'm referring to. The left-hand lower corner on those shows you the square footage for the total area for the porch plus stairs for each of the separate plans for each porch location.
Do you know the date or the revision number of that of the most up-to-date plan? Just so I can write it down, and I don't have that plan with me?
I don't have it actually with me either.
Oh, okay.
I'd be glad to follow up
On
with a,
Saturday?
brief communication, and I'll tell you what the date of the architect's revised plans
That's
are.
right. If we could just make sure to talk about it on Saturday.
Okay,
That would be
or on
great.
Saturday.
That would be
Okay.
fine.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, well, I think if you have questions about most of the materials we've submitted, Tom may be the best person, Tom Palmer may be the best person to answer them, but
I just want to say that the planting plan looks fabulous. It's just exactly what we're always looking for. The shrubs are great, and they're a little unusual, too. It's nice to see meadowsweet. You don't see that much at all come before us. And the pagoda dogwood. I was actually just at a lecture this morning by Doug Tallamy, who, you know, is that University of Delaware professor who's talking about entomology and how important plantings are for wildlife.
Sure.
And that insects are eaten by so many other animals we don't even think about, not just birds, but every other animal uses insects for protein. I had no idea, you know, how much. He talks about specifically caterpillars, and how the caterpillars need the trees. So we plant these trees, and how if we plant natives, you will find like 3,000 caterpillars healthy on a tree. And if you plant something like burning bush, you know, or ginkgos, you'll find 2 caterpillars. I mean, it's that extreme a difference. And for chickadees, like for 2 chickadee parents to raise a brood of chickadees in a season, they bring back, I mean, he counts this, it's incredible. They need every day over 400 caterpillars. And so in the 20 days, you add that up, they need 8,000 caterpillars just to raise their little chickadees. It's incredible. So that the trees that we're looking for, the plants, the shrubs, the birds are so dependent on them. But not only the birds, he was saying, you know, things like raccoons, they eat mostly insects. You know, squirrels are actually eating insects. They're eating the nuts later on in the season. So what we plant is, we know it's important, but he was incredible to have the science of how important it is. And also, these caterpillars are amazing looking. I mean, they're beautiful looking. Not only do they make butterflies, but in their stage as caterpillars, it was amazing. So, at any rate, this looks great. But I digress.
Craig, there's going to be a test on this.
What was his name?
Doug Tallamy, and he has a book out. He had a big article in the Times about 3 weeks ago that got a lot of reaction about this is what we should be doing.
And he's out of the University of Delaware?
Delaware, yeah. I think he's chair of the department of entomology.
Yes, I would be glad to answer any questions about these plans, although I think you really need to see the site to think about them. For instance, as we look at the stormwater plan, the intent of the plan is to control the increased runoff from the porch, which in the 1-inch storm will be 11 cubic feet of water. And as you see, it's an alternatives plan. One idea is to bury one of these plastic recharge chambers. The other idea is to build a rain garden down below the barn.
Sure.
And I don't really know which is most appropriate. I think the recharge chamber, when you see the area between the buildings, it's so nicely landscaped that you wonder if it could be dug up without spoiling it.
Sure.
So that pushes me toward the rain garden. On the other hand, our septic system guy told us, well, rain gardens are more difficult to maintain. That was kind of a surprise to me. A rain garden, as you may know, is simply a small depression, or it could be larger, but it has a rim and it's supposed to hold water, namely stormwater that is flowing off an impervious surface. And what it does with that stormwater is it recharges it to the groundwater instead of it having it carve its way to the nearest wetland. That's the point, basically. Simply to get the water back into the ground instead of having the water and sediments going quickly into a waterway. What needs to be planted in a rain garden? There are a variety of herbaceous plants that will thrive on the conditions of alternate wet and dry. The ones you see mostly in pictures are black-eyed Susan, butterfly weed, Joe Pye weed.
Basically, you're creating a vernal pool there.
Well, it's not really a wet place. It's supposed to dry quite rapidly. The water is not supposed to, as I think I say, it's dependent on an infiltration rate of a ½ inch an hour or more. It's supposed to be a quite loose soil for it to operate correctly. And that's something I have to look at carefully when we're out there to see if it is dry enough to make it feasible. I believe it is. But as we look at the site, you will see a little carved out area where water runs down the hill alongside the carriage house and runs toward the stream. And that's what this rain garden is aimed at, to capture that overland flow, which has carved out a little bit of a swale, and put it back in the